Okay, this video is about wireless security, and we're going to first take a look at WPA and WPA2 pre-shared keys and their flaws and why we should use 802.1x authentication when possible. And to start off, we know that everything we do in today's world is vulnerable and everybody likes cloud computing these days. So with cloud computing, we have our access credentials, we have online banking, we have personal files. Of course, we all love to do online shopping and web browsing. And the last thing you want to find out when you're connected online and you got personal data out there is to find out you've been hacked. Somebody's stolen your personal data. So to avoid that happening, we use keys. And of course, if you will imagine yourself coming home from somewhere and walking up to your front door, you pull out a keychain. You have many keys available, but there's one specific key on that keychain that's been cut just right to fit into the lock, that fits all the tumblers correctly, that allows you to turn that tumbler and move that deadbolt to allow the secure passageway to open up and let you into the secure area. Now, it's very similar to wireless. It's not really what we're talking about here, but it is similar. But the idea here in the digital world is a key looks like this. All these different numbers, letters, and characters. Sometimes it's even longer. But all wireless encryption starts with a Pairwise Master Key, and we are going to take a look at how that works. So, in pre-shared key security, we have WPA and WPA2. This is what your security network looks like, and I'll start out by giving a disclaimer here. We have an access point in the middle, and in lightweight controller-based networks, the authenticator is the controller and not the access point. And when you have autonomous APs, the authenticator is your access point. So for sake of not using the word authenticator, not using the word access point, and using the word controller, I may possibly jump around back and forth between them, but the word access point in this video means all three of those. The authenticator, the access point, and the controller. For the sake of doing 802.1x, I will be using the word access point very frequently, so just remember they all three really mean the exact same thing. So looking at pre-shared key security, we have two client devices in this network, and your access point and the Pairwise Master Key is the same for every client that gets on this network, and we're going to show how that works. You start off in a pre-shared key situation. You have a pre-shared key and you have your SSID pre-configured. Now, in order to come up with your Pairwise Master Key, there is a formula that gets the Pairwise Master Key, and that formula is the pre-shared key is added to the SSID value, and then this algorithm hashes it 4,096 times, and you come up with your Pairwise Master Key. Now, here's the issue. No matter which station, supplicant, client device, which is also the same thing, a station, supplicant, and client device are all the same thing. No matter which one of them logs on, these two values, the pre-shared key and the SSID, are always the same, and hence you'll always get the same value for the Pairwise Master Key. That's how math works. So we got to take a look at the four-way handshake. You have your client device and your access point, and there's 4 frames exchanged between the two. When the Pairwise Master Key is put in place, the client device receives an A nonce from the access point and its seeding material to create a Pairwise transit key. The S nonce is received from the client device on the access point, which is seeding material to create the Pairwise transit key over there. The Pairwise transit key is never sent over the airwaves. Then there's the validation of the robust secure network element and the acknowledgement that we both have the same security and the same keys. But the Pairwise transit key is generated using a combination of the two nonces, the Pairwise Master Key, and MAC addresses. Now here's the problem. From sniffer traces, you can gather the MACs, the SSIDs, and the nonces. That means since every client uses the same pre-shared key, the Pairwise Master Key can be generated offline, and then your Pairwise Transit Key can be discovered. Now, why is the Pairwise Master Key important? It's the master key used to generate that Pairwise Transit Key during the four-way handshake. The Pairwise Transit Key is generated during the four-way handshake and is used for encrypting your data. So if your Pairwise Master Key can be discovered, captured, reverse engineered, so can your Pairwise Transit Key. Your encryption key can be discovered as well. Now that scares us all to death. I've got some good sound effects here going on. So the problem is we can't call the internet police when we've been hacked and when somebody steals our data. It's very seldom is that ever going to work. So we do have the option to call this guy, and I got you a funny little video.
Bueno,
I don't know who you are.
it's Juan.
I will find you.
It's not Juan.
I love that video. Juan is so funny. But not everybody can call Liam Neeson when they've been hacked and send him after the guy that hacked them. So, you know, our next best thing that we can possibly do is use 802.1x authentication. And you see here below that, you see EAT, PEEP, MSChat v2, LEAP, MD5, FAST tokens. So many different flavors of 802.1x authentication, depending on what your company can afford and how strong they want their encryption. You've got a lot of variables here that you can use to set up 802.1x to secure your network better. So first we have to use Open System Authentication. Now Open System Authentication puts an authenticator, the access point, into play. And here's how we get that. You have an access point out here that's transmitting beacons, and these beacons are saying, hey, I use 5 gig and 2.4, here's the SSIDs, here's the data requirements I have, here's the security requirements that I have, and then you have a client device that says, hey, I can do all that, and I'm sending an authentication request so you can authenticate the fact that I can do all that and speak on your network and speak the terms that you require. The access point then sends back a response frame and says, yes, I am authenticating that you can speak the same language I'm speaking, so to speak. And so the client device sends an association request frame and says, since we both can speak the same language, I want to associate to your network so I can start sending and receiving data across your network. The access point responds and says, you're associated. Now in the 802.3 world, those of you that works with cables, wires, and switches, this is what has happened. You have a switch and you have client devices, your laptops or desktops, and you got a network interface card on these devices, and you plug a patch cable between that NIC and the switch port, and you see the little lights running. That means there's some connectivity, but it does not necessarily mean that data can be exchanged at this port. What it means is there's connectivity and there is a capability, but now we have to authenticate, which brings us to this page. When Open System Authentication has taken place, there is what is called an EPOL start frame that is most of the time, not always, but it's sent from the client device to the access point to tell the access point, hey, I would like to begin the EAT process with you. And so the access point sends back a frame that says, I'm requesting your identity. Now, for the sake of all the different flavors, I can't go over the exact details of every EAT because they all have variables and differences in their process. But basically, the EAT response is responded to with a username, a certificate, etc. And at that point in time, if you take a look at this stop sign here, the access point has a controlled and uncontrolled port on it that is blocked, so that when Open System Authentication takes place, no secure portals can be opened up and be compromised. But once the EAT response identity has been responded, that uncontrolled port opens up to allow radius traffic only between that access point and the radius server across the wired network for authentication purposes only. Now, the username and password is verified for sake of time through all these various frames, and you can look at the frames and the direction they're going. But once it all is verified and the radius accept challenge has been taken place and the EAP is a success, that master key generates a pairwise master key on the server, and the server moves that pairwise master key over to the access point, and the client device generated the same pairwise master key. So during all these frame exchanges, the client device and the radius server generated keys that were not sent across the airwaves. Now, after EAP has successfully taken place, the client device and the access point both share a unique pairwise master key for this session only. No other client will get this key during the session. They will set up their own master key for their session, and they will end up with their own master key and their own unique pairwise master key per client device that tries to get on the network. That's a big difference between 802.1x and pre-shared key authentication. So, with that being said, we'll take a look at the four-way handshake again and look at the benefits. And one of the big benefits here is a message integrity check that takes place on the frame exchanges. So in your four-way handshake, you remember open system authentication took place to get your client device a authenticator. The EAP authentication has complete to give us a pairwise master key. Now we have the client device and the access point both sharing the same pairwise master key that has never been sent over the airwaves, and the pairwise master key generated for this particular session only. That's a key difference you have to remember. No other client device shares this particular pairwise master key as you do over in pre-shared key. So now we have our four frames. We'll look at these again. But the authenticator's nonce, the access point sends a nonce over to the client device, which is called a supplicant in 802.1x authentication. But the client device receives this nonce, and it's used as seeding material to generate the pairwise transient key. Once that's generated, the client device sends an S nonce, which stands for supplicant nonce, and that's used for seeding material for the same pairwise transit key over here to be generated over here without being sent across the airwaves. That's real important to remember. In 802.1x, none of the keys are sent across the airwaves. And of course, in pre-shared key, the pairwise transit key is not sent across the airwaves either. But now, on the third frame, here's one unique thing. When a group, if you're doing broadcast transmissions from your access point to a lot of clients, when the validation of the robust secure network element is sent, then the group temporal key is sent, and that is used to encrypt data for broadcast transmissions or multicast transmissions to multiple clients that have authenticated to the network. It's the only time you see that key generated. It's during a client authentication during the third frame of a four-way handshake. Now the supplicant or your client device has verified that this is a trusted access point that it's talking to, and it sends back an acknowledgement frame that says, yes, I acknowledge that both of our keys are the same. We're both using the same security mechanisms now, and now and only now is the control port that we saw in this previous frame opened up, and you can start sending and receiving secured data using the pairwise transit keys that were generated through the four-way handshake because of the pairwise master key that was generated uniquely for this session only, for this particular client only, during the 802.1x authentication. It makes your security a whole lot more stable and secure, and just for sake of hypothetical situations, let's say you were hacked. The great thing about this is if you are hacked, your station is the only one that is hacked and not 15 or 20 other clients that's on the network because you are the only one that has that Pairwise transit key on this particular session. So if someone does hack you, the rest of the network has been, all the other clients are secured. Makes things a lot more secure to use 802.1x.